Welcome again for this second hour of Kivumbi 2017 right here on KTN News. In this hour, we will be bringing you celebrations by winners in the just concluded election, not forgetting the security situation countrywide. We still have our analyst in studio, and they're going, of course, to dissect for us all the day's development. And here we have some congratulatory message from various leaders across the world, of course, for the President-elect Uhuru Kenyatta. Let me begin with the UK's Foreign Secretary, Boris Johnson. And we're going to get his message shortly on the screen. And there we go. He said Tuesday was a historic day for Kenya, with millions of Kenyans turning out to vote in the general election. The United Kingdom warmly congratulates President Kenyatta on his re-election. We commend the people of Kenya for their commitment to democracy and salute those who work tirelessly and courageously towards holding credible elections, often in difficult circumstances. That is the UK Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson. We have another message here from the IGAD Executive Secretary Mahbub Maalim, and this is what he had to say. On behalf of IGAD member states, the people and citizens of our entire region, and on my own behalf, I wish to take this earliest opportunity to congratulate His Excellency Honorable Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta on his successful election for a second term as the President of the Republic of Kenya. That is a message from the IGAD Executive Secretary. And then we have a message from President Yoweri Museveni of Uganda. And he said, as you embarked on your new term of office, I'm confident that you will continue with these efforts and the important task of promoting the unity and development of your people. Under your leadership, Kenya has continued to be a key regional economic, peace and security partner. That is a message from Yoweri Museveni, the president of Uganda. And in a tweet, President John Magufuli of Tanzania had this to say, and he said, I congratulate you, my brother Uhuru Kenyatta, upon your re-election as president of Kenya for another term. I wish you success. Last but not the least, we have another message here from Rwanda's President Paul Kagame, who was re-elected also not a long time ago, where he got a whopping 98% win. And this is what he's had to say in a tweet. He said, congratulations, my brother to Uhuru Kenyatta, for a successful election and the trust Kenyans have placed in you. That is a message from President Paul Kagame of Rwanda. Of course, there are a lot of messages, coming in from various countries across the world, including a message from the United Nations. We're going to go through some of them shortly. But once again, we do expect NASA leader Raila Odinga to address his supporters at the historic Kamukunji grounds. And we're going to join our reporter Shadrach Amiti, who I believe is on standby right now. Now, Shadrach, good afternoon. And what is happening on the ground at this moment?
Well, good afternoon, Yusuf. Indeed, as you rightly mentioned, this is Kamukunji ground, a ground that is at the heart of Kibra constituency, one of the chief bases of Raila Odinga, the NASA leader. And so any moment from now, we're expecting that Raila Odinga and his colleagues shall be making their way into this ground, where they're expected to make a speech to the thousands of their supporters who are gathering here, and still many others are still driving in. And so when we got here, we tried to look around, and the expectation here is all about what message shall Raila Odinga be bringing to his supporters. Remember, this is not just another area, but Kibra constituency forms part of the larger constituency that supports Raila Odinga almost to the last man. And so perhaps to get just the feeling of what is going on and to get the expectation from the people who have come here to listen to Raila, we are joined with some of them who are just going to tell us what they expect. Karibu sana ndugu yangu, na kwa hivyo katika mkutano unatarajia nini kutoka kwa Raila Odinga anapokuja?
The information I have so far is that the Right Honorable will not be coming because of the security of the. We have information that yesterday our leaders were turned away, and that's bringing so much insecurity in the area. So
what I want from Raila Odinga is to tell us the way forward. Up to date, we are still not satisfied with what happened the other day when we voted. And what pains us so much is that when we have voted, the process was very peaceful indeed. But the tallying, we had the tallying and the transmission of the results. Then what is really grieving us again, How comes can SCS, Matiang'i, call us victims? When we voted, we were very good citizens. But now when we are out for our rights, being fired by live bullets, we are called that we are criminals. We are so much grieved, and we really want Raila to come and tell us what is on the ground.
Okay, hello. We are coming from Kibera people, but whatever we are seeing today, we didn't expect to happen. Because we voted peacefully, but when coming to telling the result, there's no truth in it. So we Kibera people, we are feeling so painful to see such scenarios still repeating itself since 2007, 2013, and now it's 2017. We are so impressed because the kind of government that is ruling us, and then they are going to rule us 5 years are coming. We are so in please because if you see these Kibera people, we voted for Raila Odinga to be the president of this country. So if you see whatever they are doing there, we can't even see the form 34A and B and C. We can't see them there. And then they went on declaring Uhuru Kenyatta to be the president of this country. These people, they have a lot of impunity. But whatever we have seen in this country, if Raila cannot be announced as the president of this country, we don't think maybe Kenya will be no longer more there. Thank you.
Well, Yusuf, those are just a mixture of reactions and expectations from residents here who are still coming in many numbers. We really don't understand exactly what message Raila Odinga shall be giving them, but what we are sure for is that Raila Odinga is coming any moment from now, and we are not just here alone. Even behind me, I can see so many journalists from international media houses and from the world over. So what is happening here is not just something to the interest of the locals, but it attracts the interest of the international, both national and international community. And so we are here keeping tabs, and we shall be waiting to see how Raila will be arriving in and what message he shall be having to his supporters. Back to you, Yusuf.
Thanks, Shadrach Miti, for that. One final question before I release you. Do we expect the NASA leader to pass by, maybe the victims or those who've been injured during, the protest that has been taking place since Friday? Well, Shadrach, I'm going to link up with Shadrach once the former Prime Minister, NASA leader, makes his way to Kibra there. Very anxious crowd waiting for a final message from the NASA leader. Remember, Kibra is one of the areas that, has a lot of staunch supporters of the NASA leader. It was once under Langata constituency where Raila Odinga served as a member of parliament for a very, very long time. Kakai, you had to react to some statement that we made earlier. Do you think it's about time that maybe we can get to hear Raila Odinga concede defeat?
Yeah, in fact, I will react to that. Then I will also want to react on the issue of issues of justice and peace. Mm-hmm. Now, you can clearly see what the locals and the voters and supporters of NASA are saying.
Yes.
And they are very clear in their message that, one, we are here because we want to know the way forward from our party leader. So, and then, of course, some are saying that there will be no Kenya if Raila is not declared the president, and that's now something that is far-fetched. Mm-hmm. But the actual...
It's not one of the options, clearly.
It's not an option.
Not one of the six you mentioned.
It's not one of the six that I mentioned. At all.
Yes.
And I have actually the seventh one, and I'll talk about it later.
Okay.
It's not one of the six options that I talked about. Mm-hmm. But then it's clear that this ethos and society has mirrored into Raila's heart, and he has decided to come out because he has been missing since the last time he appeared in public in Bomas of Kenya. Mm-hmm. And so what is basically expected of him is to come and say the way forward to them. We can't imagine what he's going to say, but one can only think that he's going to preach peace. That's the only objective thing that we're going to talk about, and assure his supporters of the way forward and lay it out. But then there's something that came up, and I think it's something worth talking about at this point. Yes. The ongoing debate on peace and justice. There have been debates of between peace and justice, which one is better, and which one should come first. And we are not unique as a country to find ourselves in this situation because we've been there before. Rwanda has been there before. They dealt with this issue of peace and justice. South Africa had a very huge challenge when they were dealing with the issues of peace and justice. Now, in Kenya, when we were dealing with issues of peace and justice, we dealt with it in the 2007-2008 post-election violence. And that time, the constitutional reforms that took place and the Agenda 4 commissions came up with so many commissions that dealt with these issues. Now, we decided at that time to talk about the Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission. Now, when you look at how we awarded it as a law, we talked about truth, we talked about justice, we talked about reconciliation commission. Now, it means that justice, at that point, Kenyans felt that justice should come first. Because issues of peace are coined into the reconciliation. So then we opted for that. In South Africa, they had the same problem. And then they decided to coin theirs differently and called it the Truth, Justice and Reconciliation. They left out the other issues. So when it comes to issues of peace, I think it's good that we have institutions in place, and the judiciary is one of such institutions that are meant to deal with issues that are around election. So then you have the justice first.
Yes, Kakai, we're going to come back to you, and of course I'm going to listen into Abdullah's comment on that. Of course, those are live pictures we're getting for you from the Kibra grounds where NASA leader Raila Odinga is currently making his way there. Of course, he's surrounded by some of his supporters. This is the first time that we are seeing him since Friday. 48 hours after President Uhuru Kenyatta was declared as the president-elect by the Independent and Electoral and Boundaries Commission, and was later issued with that very important certificate. There you go. Those are live pictures coming our way. We do expect the Prime Minister, of course, to address his supporters. The content of his message is something that we're still not clear about, of course, but we're going to listen to him and what he has to say. Not just to his supporters, but to the whole country. You've seen batteries of international journalists there, positioning their cameras, ready to listen into what the NASA leader has to say. Abdullah, let me come back to you once again. What do you expect from this rally there by the NASA leader?
My expectation is he will say to his supporters, we are working on something, wait from us, don't be violent. I don't see him issuing a very comprehensive policy pronouncement. So the best he can say is, look, I'm here, I hear you, your pain, my pain. I've been through this before, I hear you, but let's still maintain peace.
This is a man who has not yet considered defeat up until now. Do you think that should be part and parcel of his address there?
that should be that will be his personal discretion, but I'll be hard pressed to see him do that here today. But if he does, I mean, I'm happy to be pleasantly surprised, and then, he let the country go. Yeah.
I think he has taken up on the stage there, accompanied by some of the NASA top guns. We're going to listen in once the NASA leader starts addressing his supporters there in Kibra. Now, Peter, let me shift focus to the IEBC. This is a commission. Of course, the commission has assumed office in January this year. They are hardly 8 months in office. Putting that into consideration and how they performed, and they've been given clean bill of health by so many observers, including international observers. How will you rate them?
I think you have to rate IEBC from multiple points of view. In terms of implementing the legal framework, remember that the reforms were principally precipitated by political disquiet, and that's why we had Parliament then convening to move to improve the legal framework governing elections. So insofar as they have responded to those changes, you get the impression that they have actually implemented the provisions of the Elections Act to the letter. Because what are the requirements in law? The requirement in law is that the IEBC was supposed to, on the presidential election, it was supposed to transmit results electronically. Results from the polling station are supposed to go to the constituency station electronically, and then from the polling station again to the National Tallying Center electronically. Then at the National Tallying Center, there are two issues which the Commission is supposed to do: to tally and verify So, and in terms of verification, again, there's a legal requirement that the Form 34, the Form 34s are supposed to be maintained in a public portal accessible to all parties. Yes. So, if all those requirements were met, then one can safely conclude that IEBC was able to conduct a free and fair election. However, there are certain issues, perhaps, which IEBC needs to they need to look at. One is that they need to work with their critical stakeholders, the voters. We can see from the rejected votes that we need to do a number of, we really need to improve on that aspect of voter education.
I think the number of rejected voters was at about 400,000.
Absolutely, that's significant.
That's a big
votes.
number.
Yeah, so we need to improve in terms of voter education, and then of course the other issues which are necessarily created a lot of tensions, like procurement before the elections and all that. So going forward, I believe that we can learn from the challenges that we've experienced in terms of procurement. We procure early. In terms of training, in terms of laying that basic infrastructure for the conduct of an election, we have to do it early enough to avoid that situation whereby people have to go to court to get the interpretation for what you're supposed to do.
Of course, they had to endure numerous court battles.
Absolutely.
Now,
yeah.
Kakai, you are the Bombers of Kenya. Of course, that's the National Tallying Center, and you've seen firsthand how the verification, the validation of these votes were conducted. How will you rate the IEBC?
I think sometimes we often forget the history, where we are coming from as a country in terms of this institution. And I somehow speak in the sense that I've had a very close working relationship with the IEBC. Before we used to call it the Electoral Commission of Kenya. Yes. And I also worked briefly under the then Kivuitu Commission as the coordinator of elections in 1997 election. So I have a bit of experience of how we've moved and developed this institution. So let's talk about the history, where we are coming from. Then we can end up analyzing how we can judge them. And I agree with what my colleague is talking about. When you look at the Kivuitu Commission, it had its own challenges. And Kenyans really wanted to reform the institution. And
then ECK,
the Electoral Commission of Kenya, and end up reforming the institution, because the reforms in the electoral process in this country have been for a long period of time. Yes. So we reformed the Electoral Commission of Kenya, and we abandoned the ECK, and it missed the election, which everybody agrees that it missed. But those were reforms that were electoral in terms of nature, and they were good processes. Then we abandoned it, and we put the interim Electoral and Boundaries Commission, which was very short-lived. Then we also reformed it, and then we abandoned and then appointed the ECK, the former Isaac Hassan's commission. Yes. Now, which is right now the model, the constitutional model and the legal framework and various regulations that govern elections are governed under what actually went through. So the beneficiaries of this good legal framework and regulations is actually the Isaac Hassan's commission and the current commission. So if we were to judge and analyze how the Kivuitu Commission did, before that was the Chesoni Commission, how they did, we will be unfair in the sense that they were operating under very limited legal framework. So then the scorecard only comes in from the Hassan's Commission and the Chebukati Commission. Now, so we have come a long way in terms of reforming the institution. Now, when we look at how we can judge them right now, one, when you look at the observer missions, and that's why it's important to talk about observer missions. The observer missions in this country were 10 in total. And they've been in the country for, like the Carter Center, for example, has been in the country for more than 4 months. They dug and went and sat with IEBC completely and understood how IEBC is supposed to deliver this election. What is the legal framework? What are the policies? What are the regulations? How are you doing it? Voter registration and so forth and so on. When you look at the reports of all these observer missions that really analyzed the capability of IEBC, are giving IEBC a very good report. Yes. So it means that in terms of competency, performance, and delivery of an election, which Kenyans can say was free, fair, credible, and transparent, IEBC got it. Yes. Very well. Now, the only challenge that IEBC has right now is to deal with public perspectives. because there's a lot of mistrust on that institution. You remember at one point, and this is where we have to refresh ourselves as Kenyans, at one point being a commission at IEBC, you had to be appointed by the president. For example, during Moi's time, Kivuito's time below there, you had to be appointed by the president from nowhere.
So it beats the logic
but right
of the
now,
commission
we have a
being
very competitive way and independent. So we have come a long way. So in terms of delivery, I think they did well. They have been given credibility. I only had a problem with IEBC in terms of one, communication. Yeah. I don't think they did very well in terms of communicating and keeping people in communication. And I don't think they worked very well with the stakeholders. My colleague here, who is a lawyer, told you about how they had so many cases in court, case after case. Now that talks about issues of dealing with their stakeholders, communicating with them, discussing with them. This mistrust. Mistrust is what leads us to court.
Speaking about cases, of course, those who are saying they expect an avalanche of a dispute after this, and the judiciary, of course, they have their work cut out for them. Abdullah, we've seen ELOG, one of the organizations that were watching over this election, they had their own tallying system, and it almost was... It was almost the same with that of IEBC. What does that tell you about how IEBC performed this time around?
I just want to add to what Ndugu Kaikai has said about IEBC and communication. I think they could have done a much better job. Considering our history, considering the trust deficit that we have within our institutions, trying to stay as much transparent as possible would have made their job easier. It's not so much sometimes the substantive part, it is the symbolic part. When you say you're going to, which is your right in law, to go and appeal a case, people start saying, why do they want to do that? Secondly, the other element that IEBC needs to improve is managing expectations. They said that we were going to deliver this, we're on top of this, this will happen, and then a day to the election, they say cell phone coverage is only up to this part. This part, and so I think
the communication you think would have been done
and everything. That would have made it easier for a lot of people to work with them. So I think those are a few things that needs to be ironed out if we really would want to go forward. It's a difficult job. You'll be damned if you do. You'll be damned if you don't.
Exactly. Of course, just to update our viewers, the pictures you're seeing there on your screen are live pictures from Kibra, where we do expect NASA leader Raila Odinga to address his supporters any moment from now. Of course, he's flanked by some of senior NASA members, among them Siaya Senator James Orengo, also doubled up as the NASA's chief agent during the election period. The Kibra member of parliament is there. So a very anxious moment for his supporters, I must say. And of course, the country is also watching at this time when tension, violence has been reported in several areas, especially areas surrounding Kisumu, right here in the capital, areas around Mathare, Kibera itself, where the former prime minister, is expected to address his supporters. So it's a very anxious moment, I must say. And we're going to go direct to Kibra once the former prime minister, NASA leader, starts to address his supporters. Now, Peter, there are those who observed as, they're saying that this election is a very historic election. They have their own points. And one of them is that this election will see an end of both Kenyatta and Odinga dynasty as far as those who are in control of politics in this country is concerned?
Maybe not necessarily, as Mr. Kai explained. Mr. Odinga maybe has a sixth, or is it the seventh option of remaining, and therefore you can't really say that with certainty. And of course, I believe that you can't also say that for the Uhuru.
You've put in the edge factor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you might as well get another Mugabe.
No, you can be president at 8 years, and therefore Raila still has time to sell his agenda to Kenyans. And on the Uhuru side as well, you can't rule that out. People ruled out Uhuru, saying that he cannot be president, and he has a son. You never know what can happen when he fronts that son to be a leader and inheriting that dynasty. And therefore, you can't say with a substantial measure of assurance that is the end of the Kenyatta and Odinga dynasty.
I'm sure Ruto's camp will not want to hear that.
Absolutely.
Because he's also eyeing the presidency 2024.
Yeah, but in terms of improving our political landscape, I believe that the elections have been very, very significant.
Peter, sorry to cut you short, of course. Let's go